ponders his future in Houston. Sources tell ESPN the Nets are rising to the top of his list as a possible trade destination. The thought of teaming up with KD and Kyrie in Brooklyn apparently has him intrigued. Durant and Harden, teammates a lifetime ago in OKC, have recently discussed the possibility, but there have yet to be trade talks between the two teams. Our senior NBA insider, Adrian Woj, joins us now in studio. How realistic of a possibility is this, Harden to Brooklyn?
David, how hard does James Harden want to push for this?
Okay.
And he is under contract in Houston, but Russell Westbrook is already on the market, would like to play elsewhere. And there's a sense that this Houston infrastructure may be breaking apart. And if Harden decides that Brooklyn is the place he wants to be and really starts to push the organization on it, I think that's the momentum that it's going to take to get him to New York. Brooklyn has some assets and young players and potential picks and all those things that you're going to want. But a player of James Harden's caliber, Houston's going to have to get a monster haul back to justify trading, maybe one of the 2 or 3 best players in the NBA.
Very interesting. It could be a complete overhaul there in Houston. James Harden spent 8 years with the team. They've never even reached the finals, knocked off by the Lakers in the conference semis this year. And I know the champs had a busy day. Anthony Davis opted out as expected, which isn't quite as bad as it sounds, and they intend to acquire Dennis Schroder. Tell us a little bit about both of those stories.
Well, Dennis Schroder from Oklahoma City, they'll finalize that deal here in the next few days, but Dany Green going back to Oklahoma City, perhaps onto a third team, more importantly for Oklahoma City, the 28th pick in the draft. They have 16 first-round picks here over the next 5 years, but for the Lakers, they may lose Rajon Rondo in free agency. Schroder is a player who is a very versatile guard, can play both spots, and really helps the defending champs.
And as far as Anthony Davis is concerned?
The question with Davis is not is he going to be back with the Lakers, how long of an extension of a new deal will he sign? Will he line up with LeBron James? Does he do a 4 or 5 year deal? That's what we'll find out here in the next week.
Okay, obviously they want to keep him in the fold for the long haul. They're the champs. They want to keep this thing going. Woj giving us the very least. It's going to be a very busy week in the NBA. The draft just a couple days away, and then free agency after that. By the way, ESPN's The Woj Pod debuts this morning. Special 3-part series, the Giannis draft, the story behind Milwaukee drafting Giannis in 2013. It's now available on ESPN.com's The Woj Pod.
Teammate. One thing that you can't take away from me is that I love to play. I play hard. I compete every single night I step on the floor.
I go beast mode. I run the world like Eco. I go pray like CeeLo. Can't stop me like Chico's. Hey, way too fast. I gotta go. I'm in the zone. Foot on the gas.
I impact the game in so many different ways, and I've proven that for many years, and that's why I'm not worried.
Well, he's not worried, but I wonder if some of the fans in Houston are. NBA insider Adrian Woj with us now live on SportsCenter. Woj, uncertain? That seems like it's the best way to describe the situation in Houston with the 2 former MVPs. What's the latest on the futures of Russell Westbrook and James Harden?
Well, Sage, let's start with James Harden. The organization right now has no intention of engaging in any trade talks with James Harden, and they expect to play this season out with him. Russell Westbrook, they are open to talking to teams. Both sides are very open to it, but I'm told it is a very slow developing marketplace for Russell Westbrook right now. And, there are not teams right now who are ready to move quickly, at the very least, to take that kind of $130 million plus investment on, number one, in these economic times, and number two, at Russell Westbrook's advancing age. Now, maybe that market opens up over time, but right now, I think his immediate future remains in Houston with the Rockets.
Okay, yes, advanced age. I mean, he turned 32 yesterday, and that's a lot of wear and tear on that body. His former team, the Thunder, have been in talks to trade Chris Paul to the Suns. Chris Paul, of course, was in Houston just last year. Woj, how far along are these discussions?
Well, both Oklahoma City and Phoenix, they've engaged in these conversations, and Oklahoma City has, very much allowed, like they did with stars they've had in the past, Paul George, Carmelo Anthony, and Russell Westbrook, to give the star players the ability in a trade scenario to have some voice on where they might go. They're doing the same with Chris Paul. So he and his group, certainly have the ability here to bring ideas to Oklahoma City. The Phoenix scenario remains out there. There were some talks about possibly some third teams involved who might help to move some of the pieces around. But right now, I think Chris Paul is being patient about where his next destination might be, his family and where they would spend the season. Those are important considerations to him. But I think you'll continue to see that Chris Paul, Oklahoma City situation, one where they'll work together on trying to figure out a next step for him.
Yeah, Chris Paul, 35 years old, the Thunder owing him $41.4 million next year. And they also just hired the new head coach, assistant Mark Daignault, to lead the team. So a lot of changes, potentially even more in Oklahoma City.
Night between 2021 top prospect Chet Holmgren and 2022 top prospect Emoni Bates. 31 points, 12 rebounds for Holmgren, 36 and 10 for Bates. Zach, can we maybe have these guys in this year's draft?
Yeah, why not bring them in? See where they go. I don't know. Why not? Just have more chaos. The whole offseason is total chaos anyway. Let's add some more chaos at the last minute.
Why not, right? And there we go. Welcome into The Jump. I am Rachel Nichols alongside ESPN NBA insider Ramona Shelburne and host of the Low Post podcast. Welcome to Zach Lowe. Coming up this morning, Ramona broke a story on how the Warriors plan to safely fill the Chase Center to 50% capacity if they can get government approval. We will get into that in a little bit. First, though, so you've heard of the DEFCON system, right? It's what the United States military uses to show just how dicey things are for America at any given moment. DEFCON 5 is the most peaceful. DEFCON 1 is basically total nuclear annihilation. And I'm not sure exactly where hot mess is on the sliding scale, but I do know that's where you're going to find the Houston Rockets, who are one of the more tumultuous year-and-a-half runs anyone has seen in recent NBA memory. Remember, it was last July that Houston traded in a mountain of its assets to swap Chris Paul for Russell Westbrook. That started a domino of events that included trading Clint Capella, going all in on microball, an injury to Westbrook, a flameout in the NBA bubble, the departure of innovative coach Mike D'Antoni, the departure of former Executive of the Year Daryl Morey, and finally, this past week, reports of James Harden and Russell Westbrook being so deeply dissatisfied that Harden has questioned its direction, while Russ, according to The Athletic, has asked for a trade. This is not the kind of chaos that typically produces championships. In fact, since the Rockets were, quote, a hamstring away from beating Golden State a few years ago, their chances of winning a title have only seemed to diminish. And now the organization is at an extremely uncomfortable crossroads that got even more uncomfortable yesterday, which was Russ's 32nd birthday. The team Twitter account posted this. Awkward. Although the response was amazing. Our friend Worldwide Wob, they got the "we need to talk" and brought over a cake. Also this one, read the room. And dude, he doesn't even like you guys. And this one with Thunder GM Sam Presti. Well, yeah, you get it. Meanwhile, over on Instagram, ESPN posted a clip of Stephen A. Smith saying that Russ and James, quote, don't want to play with each other anymore. To which Russ actually replied in the comments, "It's my birthday, but I should say this is completely fabricated. You all have a good night." To further prove his point, Russ also got into the comments on Harden's IG, replying, "Appreciate it, Brody," after James also wished him a happy birthday. Although when TMZ caught up with Russ later in the evening, having a birthday dinner with his wife and some friends at an LA restaurant, Harden was not in attendance. Anyway, even if there isn't an ounce of friction between Russ and James as friends, clearly there are more issues with them playing together than they had hoped. Westbrook reportedly wants to get back to an offense where he has the ball in his hands more and where everyone on the team is equally accountable. It's not clear if those things can happen in Houston. But it's also not clear if the Rockets can really trade Westbrook either. Russ is indeed now 32 years old, and while earlier this year he played some of the best basketball of his career, that's still a warning light age for any player whose game is built on his athleticism, especially one with several knee and leg injuries under his belt. And that warning light flashes especially high once you figure in his contract. He is owed $132.6 million over the next 3 seasons and has a $47 million player option in the 2022-23 season. Is another team going to want to trade for that? Are they going to ask that Houston, which already attached a bunch of assets just to get Russ, now attach a few more to get rid of him? Then again, can Houston afford not to trade him if he really is so unhappy? The answer to that depends on where on the whole DEFCON scale you think the Rockets are trending. Will new GM Rafael Stone and new coach Stephen Silas be able to cool things down enough to keep the core of the team together? Or do Rockets fans need to head to their bomb shelters, preparing for the whole thing to explode? So, Zach, if there is a situation where the Rockets choose to move Russ, what move makes the most sense for him?
Well, if he wants to play Russ ball and Oklahoma City style ball, it's not going to be for a contender. So you can cross most of the contenders off the list. But I think the opposite question is the more interesting one. What makes sense for the Rockets? Because if you really want to talk DEFCON 1, DEFCON 1 is when James Harden requests a trade. And if you just salary dump Russ to the Knicks, like that's possible. You can just salary dump it to the Knicks. You could trade him to Charlotte for Nick Batum's expiring contract and maybe nothing else or something else. You know what signal that sends to James Harden? It's time to get out of here. Houston needs to get back real stuff, or at least a semblance of real stuff, and they cannot afford to give up any more draft picks, or we right away move to the next phase of this drama, which is that Harden looks around and says, wait, that's all you got for Russell Westbrook? So we can talk about what fits Russ, what team could fit Russ, what makes sense for him. But the more interesting question is the flip side. Can Houston find a deal that makes sense for them and appeases their franchise player?
Yeah, look, I like that Charlotte idea, Zach, because he's the signature athlete for Brand Jordan. I think that that's the exact kind of spot where you could see he would become the focal point of that team. That's kind of the way he had it in Oklahoma City, where he had his best years, where he was an MVP. That makes sense for the Hornets in the sense that, especially Michael Jordan, because you land a big star like this. It reminds me a little of when we were talking about what the Clippers could get for Blake Griffin when they signed him to that 5-year deal. You're probably not going to find anybody who wants to take on that many years and that much money for a player that, frankly, you need to build your team around to justify playing that much money. But the Detroit Pistons, who aren't going to get a star in free agency, if they can trade for him and keep him there for 5 years, the length of his deal actually is an asset. So I like the idea of Charlotte if Russ wants to go someplace. But I actually think it's just going to be hard for anything to happen here. And they might just have to figure out how to play together. Unless, as Zach says, the doomsday scenario, James Harden wants out too.
Yeah, I mean, it is complicated. And of course, it's a short off season. But during this off season, everyone is kind of in different places. We saw last night, Russ is in Los Angeles. So those face-to-face meetings where you can kind of cool the temperature are a little harder to have.